Well, good morning, church. We are back here again today for an awesome service, and you might be able to see we have some amazing guests. We have our awesome senior pastor, the second half to the amazing woman, Louisa, but we got John De Bruin, yay! And we also, no worries, John. And we also have a really, really special guest today, and that is Trix. So welcome, Trix. Welcome to our church. Welcome to our online service. It's really great to have you here. This morning, we're going to have a pretty raw conversation, I'm expecting. We're talking about grief and loss, something that we've all experienced in life, and it doesn't really matter even how old you are. You experience grief and loss even from a young age. That obviously the severity changes, right? But we all go through it, and I've heard a little bit about your story, Trix, about some of the stuff that you've gone through because they've tied in with you, John, and I won't spoil too much of the stuff, but I would say I'm really looking forward to the conversation, not because I like talking about hard things, but what I'm hoping that will come out of today's conversation is great life lessons. And I hear things about you, Trix, and I've seen things, John, from you where grief and loss has produced faith and has produced these amazing qualities that I think can be really encouraging for people at home, because it's sometimes, I mean, as human beings, we're not very good at coping with loss and grief, but we can get really good at it, and we can get through it with the help of God. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask some questions. So we might kick off with you, John. I know there's probably a million different things you could talk about with grief and loss, but obviously there's a few stories today that we're going to really try to touch on. Do you want to kick us off with your rendition of that?
Yeah. So for me, I was 17-year-old. Robert, my friend, and Graham, brothers, they were my friends, and we were going to go out shooting.
And they were Trix's boys, right?
Yeah, they were Trix's sons. Yeah, we were going to go out shooting one Saturday morning. So I went to the newsagent and bought some bullets.
At a news agency.
The news agency. It's actually where the green grocery is now in Penguin.
Yeah,
that's
right.
where the news agency used to be. So I felt a bit nervous going there.
Yeah.
But I got my bullets. Robert sort of instructed me what to get, because I didn't have a clue about any of that.
Right.
And drove to the farm at Loyalty where they lived, and we were going to go out shooting, and unfortunately things didn't go well that day. Graham died, which was very, very tragic. The whole story around that still is for me quite difficult to talk about. But the gun went off. I was standing next to Graham, and the bullet hit Graham. It could have hit me, but it didn't, and Graham was gone.
Yeah, crazy story, and I have heard you share about it before, John, and I used to give John a bit of a hard time, because when I came to their family, the boys weren't allowed to have guns with their Legos, and I was always like, what? That's so weird. Why can't you do that? And then I remember John telling me this story, and I remember thinking, well, that kind of makes sense. But just, I suppose, John, to bring some more clarity for the conversation, it was obviously a freak accident. It wasn't intentional.
Oh, no.
Yeah, freak accident. Robert sort of directed us to open the gate, and he swung the gun, and somehow the gun went off. It hit Graham. He fell down, and we thought he was joking at first. And what are you doing? Get up, blah blah blah. And he didn't. He didn't get up, and for me, you watch the movies, and when people get shot, there's blood. There was no blood at all. I lifted his jumper, and we looked, and all there was just a small bruise. Where his heart was, and I had to I had to go and get help.
Yeah.
And Trix and her niece were walking in the paddock somewhere, I think. And yeah, I sort of, I don't know what I said, but said there's been an accident, Graham's been shot.
Wow.
And then I came back to Robert and Graham, and there was Graham.
No life.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Thanks, John.
Robert was holding him and in his arms, and don't die. Yeah, tragic.
Yeah. I bet. Thanks, John. Thank you. I can't imagine, Trix, what that would be like as a mother. You know, I'm only a fresh father myself, and I can't imagine.
Well, I didn't want to believe that he was gone.
I bet.
So I started, giving him CPR. And we tried till the ambulance came.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they took over. And somebody said to me, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, I had to do something.
Of course, yeah.
You just don't give up."
No.
So, but the bullet went straight through his heart, and he didn't suffer. That's one good thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't even know what hit him.
Yeah. Yeah. So how old did you say that he was? 15?
15.
15. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so through that journey, obviously, of your son passing away, Trix, did you feel like that had a major impact on your faith?
No, I questioned God,
Mm.
you know. Yeah, it was not real.
Yeah.
Don't believe it, do you?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Yeah.
No. So
Did you feel like it was a bit of a long process to come to grips with the accident?
well, I never did the first 2 years because
Wow.
I was always scared that I'd heard of another family that lost 2 boys 2 years apart, and I always thought, I just hope, wait till the 2 years are past and then we'll be right. But that didn't happen either, because within the 2 years, Robert had a motorbike accident
Yeah.
and he died instantly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And after that, I never liked Christmases or New Year when everybody was happy and saying Happy New Year, and
Yeah.
you'd think, well, what's going to happen this year?
Wow.
You just don't like the future.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I realised is both the boys went to a crusade, and they gave their lives to the Lord at that crusade,
Yeah.
and that was my only comfort.
Right. So you really had a hope and a faith in that
Yeah.
that you knew.
Well, I didn't have hope. I knew I was.
Yeah. Great. Great. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, you kind of obviously, you just said then, Trix, that your other son not long after had a motorbike accident, which again is unbelievably sad. Do you want to share a little bit more about what happened with that?
Well, that was a bit more difficult for me because he ran into me with his motorbike,
Yeah.
and he was killed instantly. He had a mate on the back of his motorbike. Neither of them had helmets on because they went just round the corner to see about going on the potato harvest the next day. And they just thought I would quick hop on the motorbike. And, he cut the corner and hit me.
Wow.
And by the time I got out the car, he was gone.
Yeah.
He cut blood vessel in his neck, and
Wow.
so that was very difficult.
Oh, I can imagine. We're talking about this topic of grief and loss. You can't. I can't think of many different circumstances where you could experience such a thing. But Trix, like as someone that sees you from the outside, I would say you seem like a really positive, friendly, vibrant person. And I know you said then you didn't like New Year's and Christmas and stuff like that, but obviously you've done some real internal work
Oh, yes. Yeah.
over the years of being able to deal with that, and I'm assuming that your faith has played a major role.
Yeah,
in
the Lord,
that.
Lord has been there for us.
Yeah.
And like Penny, my daughter, said the other day, don't forget your family and friends who are there for you
For
too.
sure.
Altogether, God puts people in your path and to help you through this.
Yeah, that's
and
amazing.
I still had my husband. We worked through it together.
Yeah, that's right. Like there's the whole other side. I mean, it's not just you grieving it, but
No.
you as a mother and a wife are then doing that together with your family. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, I might bump back to you, John. Like, I'm curious. You know, you here you are, this young guy. You know, I don't know. You joke about, you know, going to church and falling asleep in the pews. So I'm assuming, you know, that that's the version of John in this time. And so here you are, faced with such a tragic loss of, you know, one of your best friends, and witnessing that. How did that affect your faith as a young person, and even now looking back, do you feel like that had an impact on your faith that you have today?
I probably didn't think about how it affected my faith at the time, but it was a very difficult thing, and me coping with that experience and seeing, you know, the whole thing, being part of that whole thing. Like you said about the Lego guns, you know, I confiscated Lego guns from our kids, and, you know, even motorbikes. To this day, I don't like motorbikes, and I freak out when you talk about getting a motorbike, Taylor.
I really want a Harley.
Because I just, you know, recently I was somewhere, and, you know, they were clay, shooting clay pigeons, and I didn't want to be part of it, because I still to this day do not like guns.
Yeah.
But just for me, coping was, you know, pushing it away. Like I couldn't talk about it. I pushed it away. I ignored it.
Yeah.
I could never talk about it. But all of that grief and all of that, it was still there.
Yeah.
And at, I don't know how many years, 12, 13 years later, we were actually, Lois and I were in a workshop, and the workshop was about helping people cope with grief. How to, you know, it was just a training session. And like for me, you know, when the guy was talking, I all of a sudden, it was like if a dam bursted. Like I just started crying uncontrollably, because it was just all bottled up and locked up, and all of that grief, which I hadn't expressed previously, hadn't been able to express previously, just all welled up, and it was literally like a dam bursting. And out of that, out of that, God.
You came to us then, didn't you? We talked about it.
Yep.
Then.
Wow.
Just for me, like that experience, like Robert had gone, and Robert couldn't talk about it. I couldn't talk about it. So Robert and I were the only ones that witnessed it, that were part of it, and I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't feel I could talk to anyone about it. So when Robert was gone, it was actually worse, because I sort of, not that it was a secret, but I felt that I couldn't talk to anyone about it.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
After that, I felt really strongly enough, you know, God prompted me, God helped me, but I rang Trix and George up and I said, I'd like to come and talk to you one evening about, you know, what happened all those years ago. And that was...
And the good thing is, we never talked at home. We always talked about the boys. Yeah. Even when it was just Graham gone, Robert would come home and say something. Then Robert came home one day, and he was in the flat with Hank at the time. And he said, it's Mum, he said, I get a bit angry with my friends. He said, because every time I mention Graham's name and want to talk about him, all the other young people just clam up.
Right. Yeah.
And I said to Robert, that's because they don't know what to say. They think they're going to upset you. Yeah. He said, yeah, but I want to talk about him. I said, yeah, I know. And we did at home. Yeah. We did talk about him.
Wow, that's a great insight.
We've never stopped talking about the boys.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it was, for you coming to us, for us it was easier accepting you to come,
Yeah.
and for you to actually ask, could I come?
Yeah.
So did you have that similar experience, you know, from people not you were saying that you didn't want to talk about it, but did people ever try to talk to you about it?
I can't really remember whether people talked to me. I think it was sort of, it's what Trick said, like as young people,
Yeah.
we didn't really know how to deal with, because it was like, you know, Graham was part of our youth group. We used to, you know, like after church, we'd hang out together with Robert and Graham and others from church. So he was part of our, you know, social network.
Yeah.
And I don't think we obviously had never been through anything like that before.
Yeah.
So talking about it wasn't something that we were prepared for or even. So, you know, it wasn't part of the conversation. And for me, like, my way of dealing with it was just ignoring the feelings, suppressing those feelings. Because, I mean, it had impacted me probably more than what I realised at the time, and even more than what I realise today.
Yeah.
But my way of dealing with it was just, you know, push it away, don't acknowledge it, don't just ignore it, and it'll go away. But, you know, what I found out all those years later, it didn't go away. It was just all bottled up inside of me, and it came out like that bursting dam.
Yeah. So in thinking about that though, John, do you think it would have been beneficial if you had some friends that said, "Hey, John, do you want to talk about that?" Like, and I know you're saying you were trying to not talk about it. Like, it sounds like you were actively trying not to. But if you had people that sort of loved you and pushed in a little bit more, do you think that would have been helpful?
It probably, I think it would have been much, you know, it would have been really helpful. I mean, today, if something like this happens to someone, there would be, you know, people would encourage people to have counselling and to actually have someone help you deal with something like that. But those days, there was nothing.
It wasn't like that.
Yeah, and my parents didn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things that we didn't go there.
Yeah.
And as a result, I just pushed it away.
Yeah.
I just pushed it away.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point that you made, Trix, about how young people didn't want to talk to your other son about it, like, and he wanted to. Yeah. And I find that really interesting, because I think there is this yearning inside us when we do go through grief and loss, that together, that's right. And you said it before, you know, it wasn't just you, it was your family, and you had these great friends that helped you pull through this thing. And so I think that's a great lesson to even just learn from this conversation, that when we do go through grief and loss, to try to do it by ourselves is well, I mean, we've got the pudding here. It is hard. It is really, really hard, and so it's so important to share our burdens and our struggles. And obviously, when we bring faith into it, that changes a whole bunch of things as well. But on the topic of faith, Trix, do you feel like through this season, or seasons, I should say, of trial and heartache, did you learn about God, or even learn about yourself?
Oh yes, you know, you can't stand on your own 2 feet. You've got to, you know, and I did question God. I asked him why, and I felt guilty about that till I read an article in Tyrrell and Sword, which was our church magazine, and it said lots of Christians feel guilty about asking God, why has this happened to me? And we don't need to feel guilty, because Jesus asked that on the cross. He asked his Father, why have you forsaken me?
Yes.
And that's how you feel, forsaken. And even now, John said, you know, something about push it away, but it never goes away. Yeah. Even now, after 38 years, it's still there. Yeah. And talking about it feels like it happened yesterday.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Do you feel like, Trix, you ever got an answer from God?
Not. No, or maybe through books and literature, but not. That I say, no, God talk to me, you know. But God did lead me to go and work with women and children from domestic violence because I
Wow.
wanted to help other people.
Wow.
Because I knew God had put me through this, not for my own benefit, you know. I mean, it wasn't a benefit, it was a hardship, but I could help other people.
Yeah, that's right. It is really hard to, I think, correlate pain and grief with the will of God. And we know it says in Romans that God can turn all things around for those who love him. So we know he can use it. I mean, you're talking about it just now, but it's not that he ever does it on purpose. He doesn't think I'm going to get up this morning and make someone's life hard.
No.
But what he can do is use it for good. And I think that, or in my experience, and it kind of sounds like in yours, and maybe John, this might spark an idea, but often it can change your perspective, and you can see God using it for the good within our life. So it's
Well, I
it's
think
a
it
powerful
has
thing.
for John, haven't you? I mean, being in this church and helping other people, you can relate to pain and grief and going through difficult times,
Yeah.
like a lot of young people do these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, we said at the start, pain and grief is not as real for us all, and obviously we can put it on a scale of, you know, what's worse and not. But to each individual, it feels real, doesn't it? John, in reflection, do you feel like you learnt different things about God or yourself through this process?
Just like as Trix was talking before, I remember quite clearly, you know, Trix's dad, Mr. Van Wyk, he'd actually lost 3 grandsons in a 3-year period.
Another one on a motorbike in Hobart.
Yeah, another one in a motorbike.
Wow.
And he was a man of faith. He was like a really great role model, sort of seeing him growing up. But, you know, he sort of said, why? He questioned God. Like, why did God not take me away? I've lived a full life. And that's, just seeing him respond the way he did. You know, he had every reason to be angry with God, but he continued to have, faith, love God, and that really ministered to me and spoke to me at the time, and still hadn't really thought about it. 38 years. It's
George was a great man of faith too, wasn't he?
So, and seeing Trix and George, how they'd lived life after that event, and again, like every reason to be bitter, but to not let that event affect their faith and their relationship with God.
Yeah.
That, to me has been a
powerful.
big and powerful lesson and witness to me,
Yeah. It's a great point, Trix. Like, how did you do that? How did you? I mean, it's probably a question that you probably can't even answer. But how do you let or not let life control you? Because it often in pain and sorrow can feel like.
Well, when I lost my daughter a year and a half ago, that was the 3rd child I buried. Then that was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And I did question God. I said, why don't you take me away from all this pain? I was a mess. And then not having a husband to help you.
Yeah.
Or to go through it together.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like, again, I know a little bit about your story just in preparing for this, but so you lost 3 of your children and then also your husband as well.
Yeah.
And
5 years ago, George passed away.
Yeah.
But he was ready to go.
Yeah.
He had Parkinson's. I mean, he just wanted to go. And the last thing he said to me, I want to go home. I had to give him permission to go home.
But still hard.
Oh, yeah.
Really hard. And I can't imagine what that sorrow would be. But I said it before and I'll say it again, Trix, you still seem like you carry this presence about you that isn't, like John said, you don't walk around bitter.
No,
You're not walking around annoyed at life. And I think that,
I have a lot of things to be thankful for.
Yeah, wow.
I have 2 great daughters
Yeah,
who I have a great relationship with, and
Yeah.
grandchildren
yeah,
who are all great kids.
Yeah.
And and I have friends and church family and my health. You know, I have to be so thankful. I mean, I'm 79 and I'm still able to do really everything I want to do. A bit slower, maybe, but
yeah,
I can. And I have a lot to be thankful for.
yeah.
And that's what I see in God's grace.
Great. Yeah. So thankfulness is one of the keys.
Oh, yeah. You have to look, like Louise and I said the other day, you look at the glass half full, not half empty.
Yeah.
And every day you get up and say thank you, God, for another day.
And did you feel like that was a real part of the challenge throughout all these trials? Is having that perspective of a glass half full?
Well, there's one stage after my husband passed away, I didn't. I had to go to a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor said, you're not coping. You're going to go and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And he made it very clear to me why I was so down the dumps. He said, every time you lose somebody in the family, you go through the past pains again, and it all comes
back
again.
Yeah.
You know, so you relive all that pain, and it just gets more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and then I understood why.
Wow.
But it's with the church help and God's help. Yeah. And singing for me is, I don't sing very well, but I love singing.
Great.
And it's my expression of my faith.
Yeah. Wow. So I know it's been a great conversation. I have so many questions for both of you guys, and I'm sure I will get opportunities to ask one day. But like in the concept of what we're talking about, grief and loss, what are some things that maybe you would like to share with the people that are watching at home and online with dealing with it and pushing through it? Like, what I suppose, what are the last words that you'd like to leave? And maybe we'll start off with you, John.
I think to acknowledge it yourself, like for me, I suppressed it, I pushed it back, but it would have been much more helpful for me to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And like what we talked about, for those around you to also acknowledge it. Like, because after Graham had died, we didn't stop hanging out as youth. Like we had lots of, playing billiards at our place, we were doing stuff together all the time. So there was lots of opportunities to actually talk about it.
Yeah.
And for me and for Robert to be able to process it in an environment where of, loved ones, friends, people that you're close with, but that didn't happen. So if I want to, I think, one thing that I've sort of learned from that is, acknowledge it, have those around you acknowledge it, and actually talk about it and process it together. And I think it would have been helpful. I didn't actually know that, that Robert wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think that would have been, it certainly would have helped me.
Well, that's for me, that's one of the lessons that I feel like I've learnt the most today, is that going through grief and loss, when other people are going through it, not talking about it is almost as damaging as talking about it. And of course, you've got to pick your times and your moments and stuff like that. But thank you, John. Thank you for your brave sharing. And I know it's obviously a really hard topic, and I really appreciate that. What about you, Trix? Some final encouragement for people that are watching? I mean, again, I feel like I'm pumping you up, but you're amazing. I've not met someone that has had to deal with so much loss and still can sit there and say God is good and have a smile on their face.
One thing I like to tell people, don't ever ask people that have lost a loved one, when do you get over it? You don't get over it.
Yeah.
You learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And the pain gets better.
Yeah.
But like I said, if like now you bring it up and it's like it was just the other day. Yeah. But don't ever expect people to say they're over it, because you don't.
Yeah. The journey is about just learning to
To
accept
trust,
it, which is
to
what
trust
John's saying.
God that this happened for a reason,
Yeah.
and to do what you can.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Trix, for sharing. Thank you for your brave heart and your spirit to be that glass half full. It really is inspirational, and I hope and pray that people at home can draw some inspiration from this, because, like I said, we all face trials in life. They're not going anywhere, but learning to deal with it and push through and include God in this process, I think, is obviously the most important thing to moving through. So thank you, guys. Church, I hope you feel encouraged, compassionate. You'll feel sad. Of course you'll feel sad, but we can learn through grief in our own life, and we can learn through grief in other people's life. And so I encourage you, as you watch this, maybe sit there and think about some of the stuff that either you've gone through or people in your life, and prayerfully consider what it could look like to be a great friend to someone else, or to share with someone else of what you're going through. Because if anything, what we've learnt today is trying to do grief and loss by yourself is really hard, and definitely not the best way to cope with it. But have a great afternoon, church. We love you, and we can't wait to be with you next week.